My wife and I were married for 10 years. I was her first and I thought, only sexual partner. We married at 22 years old, and when the story I'm about to tell you took place, we were 32. I was told she went on a vacation with her sister, but throughout the week she was gone, her responses became weird and less frequent. I was already worried by the time she got back, and my fears were only confirmed by her very strange behavior. She said she didn't feel well, and this was right before COVID reached the US, so she made a doctor's appointment. After that one, she went to a second one, but wouldn't tell me what was going on. I was in the dark and cared about my wife. I wanted answers, so I decided to search her car for appointment summaries or anything that might give me some clues. In her car, I found an open STD test and a visit summary from her doctor that said she tested positive for herpes. I started shaking and didn't want to believe it. I sat in her car for a while, staring at the trees around me. I obviously couldn't sleep with my wife again. Then I got scared I already had it. I went to stay with my mom for a few days while I waited for my own test results. My wife barely noticed my absence, because she was dealing with her own problems. Thank God my test results were clean. She didn't get it from me, or give it to me. Now I could address the issue at hand. My wife had to face reality. I was already irritated that she didn't tell me anything about it. I had lots of questions, but they didn't really need answering. I didn't really need to know how she got herpes, only that she did. While she was on vacation with her sister worked with her in the same office, which gave me an idea. I received an email invite to a work party, and attached to that email were all the emails of her coworkers and bosses. I emailed everyone a picture of my wife's diagnosis, with a text that said my wife brought home a present from vacation. The response was astounding. Before my wife realized what I did, her sister called me. She asked what was going on, and I told her all about it. She admitted that she wasn't with my wife the whole time they were gone. At first she thought I was being really unfair by sharing my wife's private issue with her work crew, but after I vented to her about it and brought up the impending divorce, she sided with me. Just then my wife came outside and banged on the car window. She looked furious and terrified. She screamed and cried inaudible words. I got out of the car, and she started hitting me, but stopped when I told her she cheated on me. She couldn't keep it together. She was overwhelmed, and probably hadn't even let the reality of her STD or infidelity sink in. I told her she cheated on me while on vacation and got herpes. She betrayed me, and now I would never sleep with her again. She cried breathlessly, tried saying sorry, tried saying she used protection, but none of it mattered, and I think she knew that. She went back inside the house, defeated after I told her to pack her stuff. Her sister came over because she was on the phone for some of our confrontations. She helped her pack and calmed her down by talking about the future she could have. All the motivation left her when she tried to go to work. She received so much backlash and shame for what she did to me. Whether it was to her face or notes left on her desk, she was insulted, called out, and slandered. She only worked for one day after vacation before quitting. Her sister's been really quiet, and as far as I know, she still lives with her. It wouldn't surprise me if she quit dating for a while, or even had trouble forgiving herself. I know I lucked out and dodged a bullet by doing my own investigation and separating myself from her while I figured out what I needed to know. I hope she uses protection and tells people about her diagnosis and cheating habits. OP, I am so sorry your wife completely disrespected you and spat on your trust. She'll have trouble living this mistake down. You were a trusting husband that let her go on vacation without you in good faith. She took advantage of you by sleeping with another man, and it's only karma that she got an STD. I am so glad she didn't try to seduce you upon her return before you knew what was happening. You really did dodge a bullet with this one. I'm glad to hear she couldn't hide her diagnosis and had to face the shame she deserved for betraying her husband. Any woman who believes she needs another man to love her needs a serious reality check. Love is designed to be true between two people that openly communicate and choose to love the other no matter what. Quite the opposite of taking advantage of the trust your spouse gives you. I wish you the best of luck. You've absolutely did the right thing and acted on your wisdom to figure out what was going on. Thank you for sharing your story. Now let's get into today's second story. Last Valentine's Day with my wife, 33, was the end of our 7-year marriage. She was supposed to get off work at 5, but at 4:50 she texted me to say her aunt has a date for Valentine's. and since she has trouble finding dates, she felt obligated to babysit her kids for her. I, 40, said that was fine and I could meet her there. She told me that wouldn't be necessary. Her aunt was weird about having men at her house because her children were in recovery from their abusive father, who had been out of the picture for some time now. This conversation really bummed me out, but I figured if my wife could be so self-sacrificing on this romantic day, then I could for an hour. I believed my wife's story, but then she posted a status update that gave her location. She thought ahead and made it so neither I nor our mutual friends could see her post, but she forgot about one person, her 15-year-old cousin, the girl she was supposed to be babysitting. She actually messaged me to ask how I was doing and gave me some disconcerting news. She showed me the screenshot of my wife's status and location, which said she was having a wonderful Valentine's Day at an upscale restaurant. Her cousin was one heck of a snoop and knew something was amiss because my wife didn't tag me or include a picture of her and I together like she always did. Due to the inconsistencies, she decided to show me. She didn't know that my wife used her as a lie in the babysitting ruse, but I left that part out and just thanked her. I checked the family locator app, which we both never thought about since we were always together and my wife's cell phone was no longer at the restaurant. She was in a neighborhood. I decided to see what other snooping I could manage, so I messaged one of my wife's coworkers on Facebook. She didn't hesitate to tell me that something was probably going on with her and a guy from the office. She said they would often deliver work papers to each other's cubicle, but she believed they were handwritten notes. They also ate lunch together in the small office kitchen every day. It seems they were trying to make it look like they were only co-workers, but there was something more to it. I couldn't believe how easy it was to gather intel from people had I been blind. I wanted to check my wife's phone, but since I couldn't, I told her coworker about her Valentine's Day lie and how she was in a different neighborhood at that very moment. She asked if it was the Sunny Day development and I was shocked that it was. She said AP lived there. She was at his house once for a party. I showed her the exact spot my wife's icon hovered over the neighborhood, and she said it was definitely close enough to be his house. I had enough. I thanked her and got off social media. I started throwing my wife's clothes and belongings out the window. Loose clothes were strewn all over the yard and roof. It started raining before she got home, and I thought karma was just giving me an extra hand. I wrote a note to put on her front door that read, "Happy Valentine's Day. Don't bother coming back ever again." When she got home late, I could hear her screaming and freaking out. She banged on the door, rang the doorbell a whole bunch, but I barricaded myself inside. I heard her on the phone with her mom and then her dad, and from what I could hear, it sounded like they couldn't believe she was locked out of her own house with her clothes all over the yard. She kept saying she didn't know why, but eventually broke down and said she lied to me and had a date with someone else, so she needed her dad's help taking all her stuff somewhere. I imagine they asked her why she did this because all she said was she didn't know. She didn't want to tell me in case I freaked out, and stuff like that. She sounded like a pitiful little girl that made a shameful decision to lie and cheat on her husband, believing she could get away with it. And now she was forced to semi-admit to what she'd done over the phone with her dad, so that he could come to her rescue. He showed up and I came outside. I told them both what I found out, all while my wife was gone. She was crying and telling me I was exaggerating and jumping to conclusions. I put her on the spot to prove I was lying by showing me the messages she had with AP. I knew his real name, and her face turned pale when I asked. She said she didn't have any messages with him, but I could see her father's disappointment. I asked him if he thought she was lying because he knew her the best, and he was embarrassed to say yes. She started screaming and wailing and dropped to the ground. I told her to suck it up because she was a big girl who made the decision to cheat on me and lie this Valentine's Day. Now she had to face the consequences of her big girl decision. She was devastated. I could tell she didn't want our marriage to end that night. She didn't want it to end. She wouldn't ever step foot into our house again. She didn't get to say goodbye to our dog. It's lucky I never had children with her because that would have been heart-wrenching. Let this be a lesson to think through your actions before betraying the one person that matters most in your life. No actions go without repercussions. She stayed with her parents for a while, but they were extremely disappointed in her and couldn't believe a word she said. She didn't get to leave their house at all, unless it was for work, and she wasn't welcome back if she was 5 minutes past her expected return. OP, I am so sorry your wife betrayed you on Valentine's Day. Of course, it's just the same as any other day, but since it's become notorious for true love, it adds insult to injury. I'm so glad you did some sleuthing to figure out what was going on. I'm glad the girl she used as part of her lie stepped forward, without even knowing your wife brought her into it. Your ex turned a kind gesture into a lie you couldn't believe. No one can maintain a relationship with that kind of dishonesty. Can you even imagine how hard it would be to have a healthy relationship with her after this? Your ex needs to mature a little and learn how important it is to remain loyal and honest in her relationships. Without that, she doesn't deserve the benefits of a romantic partnership. As hard as it was, you took the right steps to distance yourself from this girl. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you all are having a fantastic day or evening. In today's story, OP found out his wife cheated on him after he put a hidden camera in their house which showed her affair with her AP. OP then sent the video to his lawyer, and now his wife's life is a complete wreck. Now, let's get into today's story to find out what happened. I am a 27-year-old man, and my ex-wife is 23. Looking back on everything now, I believe we got married too young because we were pressured into it by my MIL. We got married when I was 23, and she was 18. We were in college when we met and started having sex, which led to accidentally conceiving our child. So before I met her parents, she was carrying my baby. I felt so irresponsible and lost. She was a wonderful girl and seemed very bright and intelligent. I didn't want to leave her now, and I couldn't ask her to have an abortion. So a month after I met her parents, she told them what happened. They were shocked but not as upset as I thought they'd be. Her mother immediately began planning the wedding and didn't let us have a say about it. After the simple and inexpensive wedding, we moved into our first two-bedroom apartment. She dropped out of school, but I continued until I graduated with a business degree. By this time, our baby son was 1 year old. I quickly started a home business and, with my parents' help, bought a house. At this time, I noticed that my wife would ignore me and stay distracted by her phone, laptop, or our son. One night, I made her a nice dinner and asked how she felt about things. She said she didn't feel attractive anymore since she had an after-baby belly. I told her she's the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen and that her belly only made me happier because she had my son. She didn't seem to believe me very much. We made love that night and it was very intimate and genuine. 2 weeks later, she was still distracted and avoiding conversation with me. I noticed she was buying things to help with her stomach. In our house, we only had 2 cameras, one in the nursery and one in my office. My wife didn't know about the one in my office. While I left the house one day to meet with a client, I got a notification on my phone that motion was detected in the office. For some reason, I felt nauseous. When I saw this notification, it was like I knew something was wrong. I watched the video to see my wife enter the room, sit on my office chair, and take very, very bad pictures of herself. I waited with little hope that she'd send me these pictures, but she didn't. I didn't know what to do because I didn't want her to know I had a camera set up. I hoped that I could catch her actually cheating on me in case I needed to divorce her. For the next 2 months, I didn't say anything about her pictures. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do, and every time I looked at our son, I wondered who she showed herself to. It was painful. During the time I waited, I installed another hidden camera that watched the front door of the house. When I came home from another client meeting one day, my wife was especially happy to see me. This was odd. She paid me extra attention while we ate dinner together and avoided her phone altogether. I knew something was up immediately, and after she fell asleep, I checked the camera footage. I found the proof I needed. While I was out, she let a man I've never seen before into her house. She went into the living room with him, out of sight from the camera. 20 minutes later, he walked but naked to the bathroom across the hall. I can't describe how disgusted, betrayed, and sick I felt. That feeling still hits me sometimes to this day. After I discovered the evidence, I wasted no time. While my wife slept, I packed her a week's worth of clothes and even gave her some money. When it was all ready, I woke her up and showed her the video. She was half asleep at first, but then her eyes were wide in panic. She immediately started to beg me for forgiveness and said that she didn't know what was wrong with her. She said she thought it would make her feel better. I asked if by it, she meant cheating on me and sleeping with a man she hardly knew, and to that she was silent. I told her our son was staying with me, and she was leaving. She sobbed and cried. But it wasn't about our son staying with me, only that she didn't want me to divorce her. After another hour of that, I convinced her that she messed up and needed to listen to me if there was any chance of patching things up. She finally left for her parents' house, and the next day, I took my son with me while I filed for divorce. I showed my lawyer the video I had, and I didn't have to pay her a damn thing. During the court hearings, she tried to get custody and child support, but it was determined that she didn't have adequate living space for a child, so I was awarded custody. Whenever I see her, she looks at me like she loves me, which confuses me because she had the opportunity to be my wife. OP, I am so sorry you had to go through that. She seemed to be facing some insecurities about her new body, but that did not mean she needed to the approval of other men. She had you as her husband and father of her child, and she should have taken your word to heart. Marriage is sacred and meant to be a bond between two people that grows stronger through the years, especially while raising a child. It is a shame that she became so focused on her outward appearance before considering how lucky she was to have a future with you and your child. You did the right thing in filing for a divorce, because it would have been impossible to trust her wholeheartedly after this. I wish you all the best as you recover from this change in life. Now for today's second story. I met my ex-fiancée when I was 28 and she was 24. We were at the same music festival with our own group of friends. She was with another girl and a guy, and I was with two male friends. One was my best friend, who saw her from across the way and swore he knew her. We laughed at him and made him walk over there with us, but the joke was on me. As soon as I caught a glimpse of her, I fell in love. I could have sworn she felt the same way, and within 10 minutes of meeting, she gave me her number. We all spent the night together at the music festival, and I arranged to keep seeing her. As we dated, she mentioned that my best friend was talking to her too. I told her he was actually the reason we walked over to her in the first place, but that I was a far better dating choice. I made myself seem better and cooler than my friend, and at the very least, it amused her. We continued to date for 8 months, and during that time my best friend told me he started seeing someone. I was really happy for him, but mostly because I wanted my new girlfriend to myself. After a year and a half of dating, I was sure I wanted to marry this woman. She was everything I'd hoped for in a lifetime partner. She played the piano and I played guitar. We wrote music together and could talk for hours about the things we had in common or disagreed on. At one point, I couldn't take it anymore and I proposed. I knew we'd be planning the wedding for at least a year, which would give us more time to grow closer. This notion made me want to bring her around my friends. I figured I kept my fiancée and best friend apart long enough, and that it would be great to go on a double date. When I asked her how she felt about it, she got really weird. She told me she didn't want to see him because he used to have feelings for her. She also added that she didn't want us to compare relationships while on the double date. That made sense to me, but I did mention it had been over a year now, and that he told me he was happy with his new girlfriend. She still disagreed with the idea. I was pretty set on getting my best friend to hang out with us. It felt a terrible idea to get married to her while she refused to be around my best friend. What if I wanted him to be my best man? I decided to ask him how he felt about going on a double date. He asked what my fiancée said when I asked her, and I lied to say that she agreed to it. After that, he hesitantly agreed to meet at a restaurant. Since her phone was broken, my girl's Facebook Messenger was logged into my phone. I got a notification that he messaged her, asking if they were going to talk to me about something. This seemed highly suspect. I replied as much like her as I could manage, telling him it would be the best thing for everyone. I held my breath until he replied in agreement. We got a table for two at the restaurant, since I tried to keep my fiancée from catching on. As soon as my best friend entered the restaurant, her skin turned pale, and she looked at me. She started stammering as he got closer, wondering what was going on. I played dumb until he got to the table, and I asked, "Where's your date?" He looked at my fiancée like she was supposed to say something, and she looked at him like she was indescribably mad and confused. Finally, he said I must know something, otherwise he wouldn't be there. Her head dropped into her hands as my best friend explained that they'd been seeing each other and having sex the whole time we were dating. My jaw dropped. I had not expected this level of betrayal from either of them. I screamed something, although I don't remember what, and left the restaurant. On the way out, she tried to follow me. I could hear her yelling that she chose me, but I left her there. Over the next week, Her friends tried contacting me on her behalf. They said things like she was sorry, she was torn between the two of us, but decided I was the one for her and other bullshit. Eventually, all contact with her friends stopped. I heard that she moved into her parents' basement because she was too broken-hearted to work and pay her own rent. My friend sent me a handwritten letter to apologize, but he knew as well as I did that we weren't going to be friends ever again. I know I'll meet someone better than her, but it bothers me that I didn't know what was going on. I feel like the one who lost the most. OP, I am very sorry to hear this happen to you. Sometimes it's impossible to know what's going on until it's right in front of you. I know you'll have lots of opportunities to find friends and meet the love of your life. We are each only in control of ourselves and manage our own karma. Be patient, wise, and honest with the next people you meet. I bet you'll be blessed enough to find people who understand where you're coming from and earn your trust patiently. It was extremely lucky that you found this out before the wedding and didn't have to go through years of marital betrayal. Try to look at the bright future ahead of you and always follow your heart. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts. My wife always had a passion for the sea. She worked as a lifeguard on a beach. I tried not to be jealous while I worked my office job. I believe she was a good woman. Our relationship was her first serious relationship that resulted in marriage. She told me she knew we were made for each other. What she failed to realize was that she was not nearly mature enough to be so committed to this idea of forever. She was longing for adventure without me, beyond her normal work day. She didn't come home when I expected one day. I called her once, at 30 minutes late, and again at 1 hour and 15 minutes late. I knew she was a grown, responsible woman, and I didn't want to be the harping father type of husband. When she did get home, she was acting very strange. It was in a way that seemed like she thought she was acting normal, but didn't realize I knew her better than she even did. She didn't see her own behavior in the mirror every day, and for that reason, I knew something happened today that didn't normally happen. I tried asking her what was wrong, or what happened today that delayed her. She acted like nothing different happened. But since she was late, she eventually said she stopped at the market to walk around during the sunset. I bought it for the night, and we went to bed. Nothing happened then, either, which was disappointing. In the morning, I woke up to her kneeling beside my side of the bed, sobbing into the sheets. The first thing she said was that she didn't mean to do it. She said she just wanted to do something fun and spontaneous, and it wasn't supposed to escalate the way it did. My heart started racing, and I felt like I'd been awake for hours. I asked her what she was talking about. She swallowed hard, started pulling her hair, and said she just started chatting with a man after he docked his boat. She was just walking, enjoying the sunset, and asked him about his boat. Their conversation continued until he invited her on the boat. It sounded fun, and he just seemed like a friendly person. She started sobbing again, and said she messed up. I asked if she cheated on me, and she could only nod. I jumped up and started packing my stuff. She kept crying, and found it hard to believe that I refused to give her a second chance, since she was being honest and telling me the truth. I told her she was being honest about the fact that she didn't deserve me, and she was a sleazy girl for sleeping with some guy when she could have said no. I told her I wouldn't be the man to forgive her for wasting years of my life and convincing me to believe she had self-control and dedication to me. That was all I said, even though she was trying to get me to say more for another 30 minutes while I got all my essentials. I knew if said anything else, it would only hurt me more. I went to my brother's house and filed for divorce. She started showing up once she figured out where I was staying and did anything she could to get me to take her back. I wouldn't answer the door. Thankfully, my brother helped by dismissing her. I could have done it, but it's good to have supporters that help you do the harder thing, because it's the right thing to do for your future. I only told her one more thing. One day, when she tried contacting me, I told her she never should have gotten on the boat, and I refused to be made a fool for taking her back or thinking she wouldn't do this ever again. If I was the one to spend time with another woman alone, people would have easily said I was cheating on her. She left me alone, but couldn't stay in the house, so she moved in with someone else. Somehow, everyone she worked and socialized with found out she cheated on me. So gossip spread and everyone labeled her as someone to avoid. Her roommate was nearly cut off from society just for having her live there, so she kicked her out. I think she moved out of town or something, because why would anyone stay in a town where everyone knows you're a piece of crap? Since she left, my life's been going swimmingly. I started dating a woman that works at the library, and even though it's hard to live alone after years of having someone with me, I coped. Now my girlfriend sleeps over sometimes, and I look forward to that. We're adaptable to change, but there's never a reason to accept an unfaithful spouse. OP, your wife should have known better than to get in a stranger's boat. Maybe she got on his boat knowing she was going to sleep with him, so she felt like she wouldn't be misleading him or getting into a dangerous situation. It's always a better idea to leave a cheating spouse than to forgive them, because you just don't know the real reasoning behind why it happened. No matter what the reason is, they didn't have enough respect or discipline to maintain an honest and viable relationship. Everyone deserves to have someone genuinely love them without failing to take their dedication seriously. I am glad you followed through with leaving her and told her what she needed to hear. You're an example on how to handle such a situation. Surround yourself with people you trust and only maintain the attitude that you will make it through this unexpected life change. Thank you for sharing your story. Now let's get into our second story for today. My girlfriend and I had just moved in together for a year. I thought everything was great. We each went to our respective jobs and spent time together at home when we were off. She got home 4 hours before I did, and usually got changed, made dinner, did some cleaning and stuff around the house, and whatever leisure activity suited her mood. When I got back, she would update me on her day, and vice versa. These things didn't happen when I got home one night. I noticed she was still wearing her work clothes, only just starting on dinner, and looked worried that I was back already. I asked her what was going on, and she played dumb. I asked her if she just got home, because it was obvious. She said yes, reluctantly, and seemed to be trying in vain to come up with a reason why she'd be back so late. I pressured her, and she didn't like that. She snapped and said she didn't think it was fair for me to be questioning her like this. Then she threw out that she stopped at the store after work, and I did notice one grocery bag that she still hadn't unpacked. I looked inside, and it had a room temperature bag of shrimp in it. I asked if she planned on cooking them, since whatever she was keeping for me gave it enough time to thaw out. I continued pressuring her to tell me where she was after the store, but she refused and eventually settled for sleeping on the couch, so I would leave her alone. I brainstormed, but I couldn't think of what to do. I looked at her phone, but it was clean as a whistle, which made me second-guess myself. I was wrong for doing that, because it was obvious something was different. The next morning, after she already left, one of our neighbors came to me with something that would change the course of our lives. She said she had something upsetting to show me, but I needed to know. She showed me her Ring camera's recorded motions. It was my girlfriend in each clip, entering a neighbor's door adjacent to this lady's own front door. She looked happy in each clip, but the first one explained everything. She said she locked herself out of our apartment, but that was a lie. AP invited her inside, and she didn't come out until 45 minutes later, leaving with a huge smile, holding her keys. The next clips were similar, but each time took less introduction, and eventually none. I thanked this woman for showing me the evidence. I thanked her as genuinely as I could. She sent the clips to me. Funny that my girlfriend arrived home and parked the car right on time that day. She wasn't too happy to see me standing by the stairs, but it was nothing compared to how she was about to feel. I showed it to her, and she started stammering. She looked at me, back to the phone, back to me. She slowly suggested that he needed help moving some stuff around, and accepted her help cleaning. I laughed and suggested we go ask him. I grabbed her by the hand, and we walked up the stairs, but at the top, she started to pull away. I told her if she was seeing a man every day alone in his apartment, I should know him as well as she does. I knocked on his door, and as soon as he saw us, he slammed it shut. I let go of my girlfriend's hand like it was a snake. I called her a cheater and sped walked to my apartment to shut her out, locking the top lock as well. She screamed no, and all the words guilty women say. She kept knocking on my door for a while. I eventually opened it, just the crack that the chain would allow, and slipped her from. I needed her to get off my doorstep sometime that night. At one point, I noticed she went to AP's house to knock on the door, but their exchange was quite short. Turns out, he had a girlfriend. She was eventually picked up, and some older man I never saw helped her load her stuff into his van. I found out later that it was a friend of her father's, who was looking to rent out his unfinished basement. It did not sound ideal, but my wife had no choice and no friends to take her in on such short notice, and under these shameful circumstances. When they asked why, and wanted to know what was going on, she tried to lie. But that only made the situation seem less severe. They gave her some advice, but mostly encouraged her to work things out with me. She eventually settled into the crappy bed she made for herself. One day, when I got home from work, I bumped into AP's girlfriend. On the way into his apartment, I asked her if that was her boyfriend's door, and she said yes, curiously. I said there was something she needed to know, and it grabbed her attention. She watched the videos of my girlfriend entering, and she was shocked. She banged on the door and pushed him inside when he opened it, screaming at him and slamming the door behind her. So at least she knew the truth. I know these things happen, and I'm trying to keep my head up in good faith that I handled this the right way, and hopefully won't be hurt again. OP, your girlfriend proved her worthlessness as a lifelong partner by entering another man's apartment before you got home. She completely betrayed you, and didn't deserve to have a safe place to live with any man. I am so proud of you for taking each step you did, including asking her about being late coming home, even though you got home after her. After you had the proof, it's good you went down to her car to greet her and confront her infidelity. Once AP slammed the door, you didn't waste time talking to her, because she only would have tried to convince you to forgive her. There was no need to let her back in the apartment until the neutral party arrived to help remove her belongings. You certainly handled this well, and even told AP's girlfriend the truth. I respect you, and wish you all the best going forward. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's story. Here's my story. I was married to my wife for 7 years. I knew something was up after several times I had arrived home from work to find only my teenage daughter at home and my wife missing. She'd always tell me what her mom told her to tell me. An example would be that she went grocery shopping to see a woman friend from work, other kinds of shopping, or had to help somebody with something. My daughter never seemed like she was aware she was lying, which is good. I don't think my wife would have the nerve to burden our daughter with any secrets she kept from me. I was so annoyed that I decided to come home a little early for a few days. Each time I sat in my car down the street to see if my wife left. On the third day she left and I followed her. She got to Bosco's, which gave me relief at first because maybe she told the truth each time. But then I saw the man she was meeting at the entrance. He was tall, handsome, and rich-looking. He kissed my wife enthusiastically before they went inside. My wife's birthday was the next day and I swore this seemed like some kind of birthday shopping spree when I wouldn't be suspicious of her absence. I went inside Bosco's and walked around close enough to see how they interacted. It was extremely romantic behavior. I started filming, and it took a few minutes for me to catch him grabbing her butt. I wanted to set the building on fire. I was so mad. I filmed for as long as I could, but then AP saw me staring at them. I left the building and got to my car, but before I drove away, I saw him come out with my wife's hand in his. She looked concerned and puzzled, trying to see who he was talking about. Hopefully she was feeling panic like I was. I returned home and wondered what I should say to my daughter. She was 17, so kind of old enough to handle adult issues, but either way it was going to be really upsetting. I told her I saw her mom with another man, so I was going to stay at Grandma's for a while. She asked if she could come with me because she'd been thinking about helping Grandma with her garden. I thought that was the cutest and most uplifting thing I could have heard at that moment. We packed some bags and left, no tears or worry. Grandma was excited to see us, and I felt like it was all going to be okay. My wife returned shortly after that to our empty house. I left her a note on the counter that I was the one watching them and I had proof she was romantically involved with him. I told her to enjoy her birthday alone in an empty house because that's what she deserved. Unfortunately, the house was hers, so she was able to keep living there, but she couldn't have AP move in because he got arrested for doing some illegal things. I'm happy to report that my ex was heartbroken. She couldn't believe she betrayed the happy and secure family she built for a man that bought her things and stole stuff. She told me a lot of her honest thoughts on voicemail ramblings. She maintained a distant relationship with our daughter that took years to return to normal. I'm sad to say that she really started to hate the things about herself that reminded her of her mom. I told her she was her own person, mixed with two people's DNA and unique among anyone else. I told her she could only be in control of herself, her own decisions, and her emotions. I reminded her that letting hatred or bitterness simmer in your heart only makes that how you behave. I told her to start writing in a journal, and she said I was preaching, but I did notice her seeming more joyful and grateful a few days later. She gardened with Grandma and went to visit her mom sometimes. OP, I'm sorry your wife gave up the marriage you both had and betrayed her own daughter. She looked up to her mom for an example of how a good woman behaves. However, the advice you gave her was spot on, and I think your daughter learned how not to behave. Sometimes that kind of example is just as effective as a good example. It's lucky you're a wise father and was there to notice she needed a little father preaching to help her get through some issues and doubts that arose because of her mother's poor behavior. She must have been extremely shallow and materialistic to be tempted by a man on the notion of being spoiled. Take your time finding a better and more honest woman. I wish nothing but good fortune and luck to you, your daughter, and Grandma. Thank you for sharing your story. Now let's get into today's second story. After being married for 8 years, my wife and I were actually invited to my mom's house. She was married to the most horrible man in existence, my stepfather. They had an offspring from hell named Lester. Lester was already 20 by the time we were invited to their house. For the purpose of story flow, I'll sometimes refer to both of them as steps. When I was still living with them, Lester and I never spoke. It was like he saw the goodness in who I was and was allergic to it. All he ever did when we were younger was break stuff, or get into trouble, and then blame me. He had it out for me from the beginning, and I assumed it was because of who his father was. My stepfather never tried to develop a relationship with me. All he ever did was tell me he was in charge, and I needed to fear him. Since Lester was his little minion, he used him as an extension of himself. So it had been a very long time since I saw my own mother, and my wife of 8 years never met any of my family. On the way there, I warned her that my stepfather and stepbrother were the worst people you'd ever meet, and she shouldn't feel compelled or forced to communicate with them at all. She sincerely listened to my warning like the good girl she was. I wasn't worried at all about her being unable to handle a little social awkwardness, or even some rude comments. She was a good wife, and for all I knew my steps had changed for the better in the past decade. We arrived safely at their house, which looked exactly the same as when I left. The introductions were awkward. The steps both looked my wife up and down without hiding the fact that they were checking her out. They barely greeted me. My mom was the one attempting to have a normal social gathering. She brought dinner out on the table where we all had to sit across from each other. The men stare at my wife like she was a television show. I asked them to stop staring at her, and that's when some yelling started. My stepdad said that I was the guest here, and he could look wherever he wanted. My stepbrother said she deserved better than me, but tried to lessen the magnitude of what he said because of my mother's reaction. I don't know how, but my mom recovered from this exchange smoothly. I think I just missed her a lot and longed for this visit to go smoothly and peacefully. Plus, I felt like my wife and I were safe. I certainly didn't expect what was going to happen late that night. I woke up in the middle of the night in my sleeping bag on the living room floor. My wife wasn't on the couch anymore. I looked around and checked the bathroom but still couldn't find her. Now I was groggy and growingly concerned. I didn't like that she was missing with my terrible steps in the same house. I decided to check my parents' bedroom very quietly, and I only saw my mom sleeping. I checked Lester's room a little less quietly and found the scene of a nightmare. My wife was having sex with my stepfather. I wish this was just a nightmare, but it was actually happening. My mom ran in to see what was wrong, and she saw everything too. She walked straight over to slap the hell out of my stepdad repeatedly. He actually fell over. Then she ran off and slammed the door of the bathroom. I felt so horrible. My mother shouldn't have had to see it, but these bastards didn't even care. Then I looked at my wife and demanded to know why she did this. She just sat on the bed covering her face. She started shaking like she was sobbing, and she looked up with her ugly cry face to mouth sorry to me. This didn't make any sense at all. The respectable and kind wife I knew was gone. I told my mom to come with me. We packed our stuff and went back to my house, leaving my cheating wife with the steps. My mom lived with me while we both filed for divorce. She was a wreck just as much as I was, but we actually did bond and have good times together for the first time since I was really young. Before I knew it, she was making jokes about us going club hopping together. Prior to our first court date, my wife got a ride back to our neighborhood by paying for a long Uber drive. When she showed up at my door, I was very surprised and unhappy to see her. I told her I had nothing to say to her. She just needed to show up to court. She got on her knees and begged me to let her in. She just needed to get some of her stuff and figure out where to go. She hadn't been able to charge her phone for a while and told me that it wasn't long before the steps started treating her like a prisoner. I told her I would never understand why she agreed to go in that room and cheat on me. Then I slammed the door in her face and locked it. She would have no mercy or communication from me. In court, my mother got alimony from my stepfather and continued living in my house. I stayed with her for a while, but once the divorce was final, I let her rent my house cheap while I found a new place to call my home. I believed in keeping close to my mother, but not that close. I needed to be independent and remain an eligible bachelor if I was to find a woman of equal quality. I got settled into my house really well before allowing any women to come over. I never saw or heard from my ex. She failed to show up to court for a divorce. I never heard from the Steps ever again, but I did find out that Lester was sent overseas in the army after his dad died in a construction work accident. It doesn't sound like a very happy life, and that's all I'll sum them up to. I'm happy with where I ended up after losing my wife of 8 years. I hope my story stops people from cheating because it causes mass destruction and pain. Hopefully more for the cheater than the victim, though. Wow, OP. I'm sorry your wife chose to put herself in a situation that allowed for her to cheat on you. I'm not sure what she was thinking, but it's clear they were giving her attention, which indicates they thought she was attractive. Maybe she let this attention go to her head, and she simply didn't think about the consequences or how you'd feel knowing the truth of her actions. This is just really despicable to me that she couldn't use a little self-control and modesty to avoid breaking your heart and ending her marriage. Who knows how long she would try to hide this from you if you didn't find out. My guess it is a really long time, even if her behavior changed. I'm glad you didn't have any children with her, Opie. I'm glad you have a second chance and got your mom out of a bad situation too. I wish you the best of luck going forward. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe.